Produced by the Division of Instructional Television, Maryland State Department of Education, in cooperation with the Division of Instruction.
A 100 years ago, barges like this one at Great Falls, Maryland, moved along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. Crews often worked 16 hours a day, except in winter, when the C&O Canal was closed. Most of the boats were run by families. Canal company managers preferred having a family man as skipper because they thought he would be more reliable. Sometimes, after the man of the family died, his wife would continue to operate the boat as skipper. Children helped with the work, too. Parents worried that young children might fall into the water, so they would tie the younger ones down to the roof of the boat. For cooking, they had small wood or coal stoves, so simple dishes like stew were favorites. There'd always be a pot of hot coffee on the burner to help people make it through the long nights of steering the boat or tending to a sick child or a lame mule. It was jokingly said that to save time and space, the stew and the coffee were cooked together in the same pot, but that was just a rumor. In the early 1800s, business and government leaders realized a method was needed to get coal and farm products from western Maryland to the port of Georgetown in Washington, D.C. But cargo ships could not go up the Potomac River beyond Georgetown because the river becomes very rocky and rough. They decided to build a canal beside the river from Georgetown to Cumberland. Canal construction began on July 4th, 1828, at Little Falls, Maryland, near Georgetown. But something else very important was happening the same day in Baltimore. Construction was started on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. It would be following most of the same route to Cumberland along the Potomac River. The people who built the canal ran into terrific problems. Land along the river was hard to buy. Each lock was made of the kind of stone found in that area. They didn't have enough stonemasons here, so they brought them over from Europe. Irish, German, Welsh. It was said that the ancestors of these stonemasons learned stone cutting from the Romans, and the craft was passed down through the years. These workers were promised good food, a place to live, and a roof over their heads, and good pay. But when they got here, they found conditions were not as promised. There would often be no place to live, and sometimes they wouldn't receive their wages because the contractors who had hired them would take the money meant for the workers and leave town. Working on the canal was a rough life. Building supplies and food were scarce and expensive. Construction crews suffered from malaria and cholera. Sometimes there were outbreaks of violence in the construction camps. Canal construction ended at Cumberland, Maryland, 22.5 years after it started. Originally, it was planned to go all the way through the mountains to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But the railroad offered too much competition for the canal because it was faster, more reliable, and less expensive for shippers. The canal closed down in 1924, but while it operated, the C&O Canal made major contributions to our country. During World War I, most of the coal used by the Navy in the Atlantic was carried by canal barges from the mountains of Cumberland down to the port of Georgetown at Washington. The canal also helped the cities and towns along the route grow and develop. Today, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal belongs to all of us as a National Historical Park.
Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Sail away, lady, sail away. You'll be an angel by and by. Sail away, lady, sail away. Don't you rock and die, oh, don't you rock and die.
A canal uses locks to raise and lower boats. After a boat enters the lock, the lower gate is closed. The upper lock gate is then opened and water enters, raising the boat to the higher level.
Sail away, ladies, sail away. That's the only life I know. Sail away, ladies, sail away. Don't you rock and daddy-o. Don't you rock and daddy-o. Don't you rock and daddy-o. Sail away, ladies, sail away.
On the C&O Canal, there were 74 of these locks between Georgetown and Cumberland, like a series of giant steps up the mountains. As boats moved downstream from Cumberland to Georgetown, the process was reversed. Unlike the rocky, shallow Potomac River, the C&O Canal was level and deep enough for barges. There was a towpath beside the canal so mules could pull the boats.
Mules were used on the canal because they're less temperamental than horses. A horse is hard to train because he wants to run, but a mule won't. Mule just take it easy and go real slow, all the time pulling hard and steady. I mostly let them go on their own, and they know what to do. Once you train them, you don't have to bother them. They know how to pick up a tow line. When you tell a mule to step, he knows what you mean. He knows to pick up and pull. When these boats were loaded with coal coming down the canal from Cumberland to Georgetown, the mules proved their worth. A lot of people say mules are just stubborn, but they're not. They just know what they can get away with.
It was a hard life working on a canal boat 12 to 16 hours a day, but it probably wasn't any harder than the life of other working people in the country at that time. They often worked 12 hours a day in factories or at farming. At least the canal people had their children around them all day as they traveled up and down the canal.
Sail away, ladies, sail away. Give the other one to my son. Sail away, ladies, sail away. Don't you rock on daddy-o. Don't you rock on daddy-o. Don't you rock on daddy-o. Sail away, ladies, sail
Pre-recorded on location by the Maryland Center for Public Broadcasting.